Hey gang, Professor rzfeeser here, and today we're going to check out creating a repository on GitHub. There's other places you could make repositories. GitLab is a popular option. You could even make one locally, but today we're going to go through GitHub's user interface, creating an account, creating a repository, putting code into that repository from GitHub, as well as the command line. You can start by going to github.com. The landing page is going to change from time to time, just like the sign up process, or maybe where the click is to sign up is going to change from time to time. Right now, looks like we have a sign up for GitHub in the middle. There's also a sign up in the upper right hand corner. If you happen to have an account, you can sign in. There's really no need to worry about anything mentioning an enterprise trial. That's for actually running this software inside of your corporation. We want to use GitHub as a service, which we can sign up for free. That's really just a fancy way of saying we want an account. Now, creating an account, that process changes from time to time. So if you don't have an account, need to go through this, do your best. I don't think the target moves that often. Typically, when this is done, they're going to send you a confirmation email, which you have to click in order to be able to create a repository. I already have an account. I'm just going to sign in to my account. The first time signing into GitHub, they might put you through a wizard. They might help you create your first repository or have some sort of hold your hand to try to get started. Moving forward though, that will not be there. The interface is fairly familiar and doesn't change that often. What's typically universal is in the upper right hand corner, you're going to find a plus sign. That plus sign allows you to create a new repository. So in the upper right hand corner, if you're seeing a plus sign, you can go ahead and create a new repository. This is of course after you've gotten signed in. The next thing you might do is up top, change your URL to github.com/new. If you go to github.com/new, that'll shortcut you to the same spot that this plus sign new repository would take you. So what's a repository? Repository is a place to store code. That's what we want to do, is store code. We don't need a repository template. We'll skip that. The owner should be yourself. The repository name, we can all make the same thing. Code with rzfeeser example. The description just needs to be subject line of an email, something like learning to create repositories via code with rzfeeser. Public and private, I should stress that even if you choose private, a repository is never a place to put sensitive information. That is to say, secrets, tokens. There's better places to store that in key stores. A README file is exactly what it sounds like, and it's a best practice technique, so let's choose one. A license is also best practice. If you're not sure what to choose, something like the MIT license is generally a good place to start. But don't feel any pressure to put any license in there, especially when you're getting started. After you click the button to create the repository, you're going to be sitting on your profile, followed by code with rzfeeser example, if that's what you chose. There's a couple of tabs up at the top. We are currently on the one called code. We're on our main branch. We can have as many branches as we want to, but we currently have one. Our initial commit, how many times we've hit the save button, has happened only one time. It just changed to about a minute ago. And has a unique hash identifier. No one besides ourselves is interested in our code currently. No one's copied our code. No one's given us a thumbs up or a star. Adding code to our repository is straightforward, especially if we're going to add code to the main branch. If we're going to work through the GitHub user interface, we can do that by clicking Add File and then selecting Create New File. Alternatively, you could upload a file as well. We'll create a simple Python file, main.py. The contents, we'll start with a shebang. Followed by a simple documentation string that's 3 ticks, followed by whatever you want to write there. End it with the 3 ticks as well. Those can be single or double, be consistent. Def main, colon. In Python, if a line ends with the colon, typically the subsequent line, it's a safe bet to assume that it's going to be indented. We'll use a print function. Print pushes the standard out. If name equals main, in quotes, colon, indented main on the next line, calls our main function, is a best practice way to execute our main function. So we have a simple main function. The print function from the standard library is called within it. And we have a conditional if name equals main, that when true, calls the main function. If we call the script, if you call main.py, that conditional will be true. We're going ahead and hit commit changes. This pop-up question is just asking us if we want to create a new branch or if we want to put it on the main branch. When you're first starting out, less is probably more, so let's just commit to the main branch. Commit changes. Here you can see our main branch now has license, readme, and main. If I click on the code tab, it hops me back to the view that we saw initially. Here you can see I'm now up to 2 commits and the hash has changed. We can see that main.py file as well. If you click on it, there you can see the script. Let's click back on code, or if you click on code with rzfeeser example, you'll get to the same spot. There's quite a few ways we could pull up a Linux command line. I'm using an Ubuntu app, which is effectively a virtual machine, available now in the Windows Store. It's the Windows subsystem Linux, which is a managed VM. If you have it, you could click into it. If you don't, it's just a Linux bubble, and it happens to have Git installed, which is why I reached for it. What we want to see here is, can we clone this code? Can we get the code out of GitHub and into the command line? And we can do that with a tool called Git. Now, Git's an app. It came before GitHub. GitHub was the graphical conclusion of Git. It said, hey, there's lots of things that the CLI tool doesn't offer. Backing up your code in terms of catastrophic events. Being able to share your code with other folks. The safety that button clicks bring. Git clone is the command that lets us copy a repository from anywhere, followed by the path. rzfeeser would be replaced by your username. Code with rzfeeser example, if that's the name of the repository you created, that's what you should write there. If you made a private repository, it will not work. you'll be challenged for a username and password. Now your username is whatever your username on GitHub was. The password needs to be a token though. And I'll show you how to deal with that. We're all going to need that when we try to push our code back to GitHub here in a moment. For now, you just want to cd into the repository, which is really just a directory. If I do an ls, you can see the license readme and main.py, which is the same thing we have up on GitHub. I'm going to edit main.py. I'm going to make a single change. I'll just put a comment at the end of this line. Display to the screen. So there's a change. Now, just as a point of clarity, if I click on main.py right here, I don't see that up on GitHub. They're not magically linked somehow. You can see up on GitHub, I still have 2 commits. And actually down at the command line, I can say, hey, how many commits do I have? That's git log. There's the 2 commits. You can see the latest commit being the same as I see up on GitHub. And this is why there's no chance of the change I made to main.py being felt by GitHub. I have to tell the local repository, hey, save that change that was made to main.py. And then I have to push that change up to GitHub. To do that, there's a couple steps involved. None of them are all that hard. The first one is maybe just type git status. That shows you that there was indeed a change to main.py. The next one is going to be git add main.py, which means we want to save that file. Not that we saved it yet. It's just, yeah, we want that change. We like that change. That makes more sense if I type git status again. That makes more sense if you consider I might have created a file called passwords.test that has a bunch of passwords in it for testing, but I don't want them to end up in my repository. It's not a good idea to put secrets in the repo. So I want to have to say like, hey, add this, add this, add this. I've added main.py. There was only one thing I needed to add. It's now time to wave the magic wand. That's called a commit. So I can do a git commit and then add a subject line, -m as the subject line, and say something like CLI change, in quotes. And when I hit enter, this won't work. It says, hey, it didn't work, but that's simply because you have to provide some metadata. Go ahead and type git config --global. You don't have to throw the global flag. You can set settings just for this repository. User.email. That does not have to match anything up on GitHub. rzfeeser@example.com is fine. This is just metadata. Git config, user.name. Now, if it does match your name up on GitHub, your commit will be linked with your profile, but it really doesn't matter. At this point, we can now just run the git commit command. It'll work. CLI commit is what we'll say the subject is. And that worked. So if I type git status or git log, you can see now there are 3 commits. But if I look out on GitHub, I still only have 2. Even if I hit refresh, I still only have 2. The process of getting what I've done at the command line up to GitHub is called a push. So what I need to type is git push origin. Origin is just a variable. It's a shortcut that's created when you do a clone. When I typed git clone in that long URL, it copied that URL for me. It said, you don't want to type that again. We'll save that for you. I could type origin. I could also put the https github.com. Origin is fine. When I hit enter, it's going to say, what's your username? Now that's rzfeeser. That's what I signed up on GitHub with. The password, I can't just type in my password. That won't work. You have to generate a token. And that's actually quite easy. Let me show you how to do that. Click over to GitHub. In the upper right-hand corner, click on your profile. Click into Settings. Over on the left, scroll down and click on Developer Settings. Click on Personal Access Tokens. Click on Token Classic. Go ahead and generate a new token. Generate a new token classic. Give a quick note about what this token represents. An expiration. And then you need to check at least repository. Scroll all the way to the bottom and generate token. The token that's generated gets displayed right away. It's not going to last any longer than just on this page, so you want to copy it and either store it in a safe spot or use it right away. So I'll head back to our repository and pop our Linux screen back up. I'm going to paste that token in there, or attempt to paste the token in there as best I can. But it doesn't echo it back to me, so if it doesn't work the first time or it doesn't work for you, no big deal, just try it again. It worked. Just a right click and it worked. Back on GitHub, if I hit refresh, you can see that I'm now up to 3 commits. And if I click on those commits, you can see I have an initial commit, a create main, and a CLI commit. It was made 5 minutes ago. It's the one I made from the CLI. Before we wrap up, one of the things you can do is head over to github.com/rzfeeser, press the follow button, then you'll stay up to date with any code that I release moving forward. You've created your own GitHub account. You've created a repository, you've put some code into that repository, both from the GitHub user interface as well as from the command line. Even if this isn't totally making sense yet, just keep doing it. Maybe even repeat the lesson if you need to. Moving forward, put your code out on GitHub. Try to use repositories to back up your code. I promise you, these are industry standard skills you got to know how to use. Just one word to the wise, which would be, don't put passwords, don't put secrets out here, don't put sensitive information, even if you're creating private repositories. It's not best practice. All right, gang, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time on another episode of Code with Feeser.